So my father was the one who said, life is a marathon, not as a sprint. I think when I called him and thought that I just ruined my life. And I realized at that time that I had a lot of timelines, really, these really unrealistic timelines that I had. I felt that I had to be, engaged by 25, married by, they might have been younger at the time. I think it was, married at 25, children at 28. I really just had these ideas in my head of what I needed to be doing and at what time, and that I felt like I was really behind. So I think it was at that moment that I just kind of let go of all these, made up timelines and schedules. And, I started my business at 35. I was married at 30, started my business at 35, had my children at 36. And that was the perfect schedule for me. But I really had to, to sort of put these very imaginary timelines behind me and realize that I was on my own schedule.
Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
For everyone listening and watching, we are here with Lauren Santo Domingo. I don't even know where to start. She co-founded Moda Operandi and now is the chief brand officer, and then most recently the artistic director for the home collection at Tiffany & Co. and also a contributing editor at Vogue. And you have become somewhat of a, I would say, household name in the fashion industry. So we are so honored to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you.
Did I miss anything? How do you introduce yourself usually?
I usually just say I'm Lauren Santo Domingo. I'm one of those people I introduce myself unless you're like a close family or friend. I always say my name. I always assume the other person doesn't know who I am. I hate when people say hello and then I have no idea who they are. So I always say my first and last name.
I think that's fair. And I also forgot another important part. You have 2 children and are a mother. So on top of all of that.
And they'll probably be in here like any minute storming in.
Oh, good. We expect nothing less.
Yeah,
we want the raw footage. You are clearly very accomplished. Can you tell us a little bit about what led you to your career path, what it's been like since being at Tiffany & Co., kind of just a little bit of background for those who don't know?
So I grew up in Connecticut. I went to USC, University of Southern California, and I studied history. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I had done some modeling and summer vacations, and I had one experience. I worked a bunch in high school for this magazine called Sassy Magazine. And there was this really legendary editor named Andrea Linné. And she, she was just a real, she was a legend. And it was always such a privilege to work for her. And I always thought that what she did was incredible. She would have the cameraman, the lighting, the hair, the makeup, the prop designer, everyone sort of, really, she would have a vision and she would get everyone to really follow and execute her vision. And she had a very clear idea of what image she wanted and trying to, get this whole group of people together to really execute her vision. I was just always really inspired by that. And, I don't think I knew what I wanted to do. But I definitely learned a lot from watching her, and that if you really believe in something, even if it's something as silly as an image, if it's something you really believe in, getting people to come along for the ride with you, and helping along the way is really important.
What led you to Moda Operandi and so on and so forth?
Yeah, so that was my first experience. So I knew I really wanted to work in fashion, but I didn't really know how. I moved to New York City, and there was a job opening at Vogue. There was actually a couple. I applied for a few spots that I did not get, probably rightfully so. At the time, I was going out a lot, and I was, really enjoying New York City. was probably, not the greatest hire at that time. So eventually there was a good fit in the market department at Vogue that really suited me. And I think from then on, I knew that I wanted to be in fashion. I knew that this was the world. I loved fashion. I felt like it was an industry that was really run by women, for women, by women. And it was just an environment that I felt like I thrived in and I belonged in, and with the right amount of work and focus, that it was a world which I could accomplish something. Working at Vogue, I really had a really unique access to fashion, to runway shows, to fashion designers and ateliers. And I realized that that was such a rare and a rarefied opportunity. And I really wanted to share that. I loved this world and I wanted to share it with other people. I felt so lucky to be a part of it, but I realized that there were so many people that just didn't have the access that I had. And I think I am just by nature, I am an oversharer. And I think that nothing is really good until it's shared. In starting Moda Operandi, what I really wanted to do was to bring the runway and these designers to other women and give them the access to the runway, and also to just share in the excitement and the beauty and the thrilling nature of this industry that is so dynamic. Every season it's changing and there's always something new coming down the runway to get excited about. And I felt like in the current format of fashion, once a month, it just didn't capture the excitement that I felt day in, day out working at Vogue. And I wanted that experience for everyone people to really feel it and feel like they were really a part of it.
I love that. And so now you're at Tiffany & Co. also. How has that been?
Tiffany's great. I mean, we'd been doing at Moda for about the last 6 years. We've been doing a home collection, tabletop and home decor, accessories and things like that. Have a great team for the last 6 years. And, we've been really doing some beautiful things. So when the opportunity came about at Tiffany to help them with their creative on tabletop and accessories, I was delighted, and it's been incredible. I mean, Tiffany for me is such an iconic name. It's a brand that I really grew up with it was definitely the first luxury brand that I knew, that I was exposed to as an American woman. For me, that was, the brand with the most heritage and the most iconic in my mind. So it's been really exciting to watch it come into itself and to be reinvigorated in this way, and to really be full of modernity, but also really lean into that heritage. So it's been an exciting project. There's an incredible team there, and increasing momentum, a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. We have iconic brands. They're not just in France and Italy, and, Tiffany is our luxury brand, and I'm super proud to be a part of it.
It's so cool. Such an incredible opportunity. What would you say has been your biggest challenge in your career so far? What was one of the most challenging times you've had?
The world of e-commerce is quite new. When we launched 12 years ago, there were very few before us. So a lot of times hiring talent, when you're looking at people's resumes and things, it was impossible to find people that had been doing this for a very long time. And so I think almost everything that we've done, we're learning as we go along, and having to really adapt. I think in some ways that was good for me because, you don't know what you don't know. And there weren't a lot of people out there able to tell me that I was doing something wrong, because at that point, there really wasn't a right way of doing anything. So that was quite liberating in a way. But then also, I think the most exciting at the same time.
So the whole question of the show, I'm really excited to hear the answer. But what is the best advice that you feel you've ever gotten?
The best advice that I ever received was the old adage that life is a marathon and not a sprint. And there was a time in my career I was working at Vogue, and I was offered a job at a iconic, one of the world's most prestigious fashion brands, to work in their marketing and communications office, and a pretty senior position. I was maybe 27 at the time, and I was not ready to take that job. And I had went through a series of interviews, and I was very nervous, and I felt like it was one of those things that this opportunity will only come once in my life. And I had, passed every level of interview. And when I finally made it in front of the CEO, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to do the job that was expected of me. I didn't have the skill set. My French was not as good as I had said on my CV. There was a lot of technical, a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of Excel, budget. There would be headcount. I would have been way over my skis. And I looked at her, and I told her, and I turned it down. I said, I'm not ready to take this job. I want to have a really long career in fashion. And if I blow this now, that's it for me. And, she was really taken aback, and she said most people would come in here and, fake it till they make it. And I really respect that. So my father was the one who said, life is a marathon, not as a sprint. I think when I called him and, thought that I just ruined my life. And I realized at that time that I had a lot of timelines, really, these really unrealistic timelines that I had. I felt, and I don't know where they came from, I felt that I had to be, engaged by 25, married by, they might have been younger at the time. I think it was, married at 25, children at 28. I really just had these ideas in my head of what I needed to be doing and at what time, and that I felt like I was really behind, and that I was, that I wasn't, on schedule. And I really realized at that moment, I'd always done things a little slow. I've always taken my time and really wanted to understand or improve before I move on to the next thing. And so I think it was at that moment that I just kind of let go of all these made up timelines and schedules. And, I started my business at 35. I was married at 30, started my business at 35, had my children at 36. And that was the perfect schedule for me. But I really had to, to sort of put these very imaginary timelines behind me and realize that I was on my own schedule. And create a more realistic timeline for myself.
I think that is such an inspiring story. It's true, you rarely hear of people who get an opportunity and turn it down. I feel like the message usually is like, say yes to everything. Like, if you say yes to everything, you're opening doors. And I feel like any kind of like business coach would tell you, like, just take the job and you'll learn as you go. So was it just like a real gut instinct that you were like, no, this isn't right for me?
When I took the job at Vogue, I struggled for a minute. It's hard, it's demanding, it's time consuming, it's really high pressure. And it took me a minute to settle in and to really, get the ropes. And I like to think by the end of it, I was one of the best market editors that ever came through those doors. But it took me a minute. I'm
sure you were.
It took me a minute. And I just realized that I don't want to put myself in situations where I'm going to be struggling to keep up. And I want to be, whenever I take on the next chapter, I want to feel really ready. I think life is hard enough. And playing catch up or just, feeling overwhelmed, or, there's some things you can manage and some things you can fake and some things you can't. But yeah, it was really my instinct. And my instinct was that I wanted to work in this industry for a very long time. And I wanted to be a valued member. And I didn't want to blow it. And I thought that if I take this position that is just I'm not suited for, I could burn some bridges and maybe, hurt my reputation. And if I'm not doing a great job, that could actually limit me in the future, more so than not taking it.
Absolutely. I think that's such a mature decision that probably most people wouldn't really have the foresight to make. I love that advice too. Have you felt like with motherhood, especially, I feel like those timelines just follow us throughout our lives, those expectations of what we should be doing at certain times, then it becomes what your kids should be doing at certain times. Have you felt like you needed to break those timelines with motherhood as well?
Well, I figured out I was dating my husband for like 7 years, and every single person would ask me, "When are you getting engaged? When are you getting engaged?" And I felt a lot of pressure from that.
Yeah.
Um, and I put that pressure on my husband. And I put that on him, and then I kind of figured it all out because the second I got engaged, the next question is, well, when are you getting married? When are you getting married? And then I don't think I was married for 5 minutes before, well, when are you having a baby? When are you having a baby? When are you having
So
the next
true.
baby? Where's your baby going to school? So I realize it just never ends. And that it's not pressure. It's just small talk. It's like asking how the weather is. No, I don't need to change my whole entire life, around these comments. It's, someone might as well be asking, what did you have for dinner? It's not real. And, but I only figured that out until I think it was when I was, happily married that I started getting the, when are you having a baby question. And that's when I realized, like, this is just never going to end. And it will be, then where's your child going to school? Where are they working? When are they getting married? When are they having children? When are you having grandkids? So you
Yeah.
just realize it's going to follow you forever. But yeah, it's sort of an imaginary pressure, I just sort of realized it's not real.
Yeah, I love that. It's just small talk. I feel like it's just a framework we've created as a
Mhm.
society, as every society does, to have certain like certain milestones that
Mhm.
everyone follows.
Mm.
But I love it because I feel like now more and more people are saying, "No, like screw it. Like we're not going to follow those same milestones at the same
Yeah.
time, the same way."
Yeah, I'm not going to fall for that.
No, no, and I love that. Do you have a worst piece of advice that you've ever gotten?
I was going to say, the fake it till you make it. I you know, I ask questions. If I don't know something, I am the first one to ask a question. If someone knows something more than me, I'm amazed, and I want to know everything and I will ask you. And I think that faking it can sometimes really get in the way of growth. And I think there's something, I've always been very transparent about what I know and what I don't know. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm bad at. I mean, sometimes I think I'm self-aware, to a fault. I'm like, I suffer from self-awareness. Uh, but I think just being, I think that can be, at least in my experience, that faking it, you're really not going to learn. You're not going to learn as much as if you just sometimes come in and ask for help, ask to have things explained to you, um, to really learn, to learn in a meaningful way, as opposed to just, absorbing what you can as quickly as possible and until, until you're found out.
I love that because I feel like people would think that was like the motto you go by. In the fashion industry, I feel like from what I've seen on the outside, and I had some experiences. I thought I wanted to be in fashion when I was in college. I did PR and I was like, I want to be in fashion PR. And the little experience I had, it seemed like everyone was just not everyone, but the sample that I saw was like everyone was kind of trying to be a little bit cooler than each other and seemed like they kind of had it a little bit more figured out and they knew something that everyone else didn't. And so I find that such like a humble stance to take, considering you're in an industry that a lot of people would say is quote unquote like all about faking it till you make it.
It was just assumed that you knew nothing and that it would take a lifetime to learn what, the greats knew.
Yeah.
It was Grace Coddington or Anna Wintour. It was assumed that you knew nothing. And you were lucky if you could ever learn, even to have the opportunity to learn. So I think there was maybe something in that where not knowing anything there was no shame in it. Um, we were expected that if we knew something, I mean, it would be a shock. It would take a lifetime to know the references and to have the experience. Um, So I felt no shame in not knowing. We weren't expected to know anything. We were expected to learn everything as quick, as quickly as we could, but there was no shame in not knowing anything. In fact, I remember once Grace Cunnington said she wanted to do some story and she was using Peter Lindbergh as a reference, and everyone got really excited and ran off. And so I said, "Oh, so we're doing a aviator themed shoot?" What? I'm like, "Yeah, Peter Lindbergh, the pilot, right?" Oh, he's a black and white photographer that shoots with backdrops on the beach, like you're an idiot. But there's no one, it's not expected that you would plop out of, be a 21-year-old assistant and be like totally familiar with everyone's body of work,
Have you found that same trend nowadays, or do you feel like people kind of want to act a little bit more like they do know more than they do?
I hope people around me know more than I do. I mean,
Good
I
point.
have honestly, like the people in my office are much smarter, much more clever. And if I'm ever, I have a joke with my friends, if we're ever the coolest, the most popular, or the smartest person in the room, then we're in the wrong room. I'm very content, not knowing everything and hoping I can learn from people around me.
I love that. What advice would you give to someone, potentially a younger woman who is trying to start a career, whether that's in fashion or any type of career, and who is just having a hard time figuring out where to start?
An exercise that we all sort of did at Vogue was that it was really important that everyone knew what job they wanted. We all started with the same job, but it was important that everyone knew what job they wanted and where they were going to go. It's like a professional manifestation. And I always really followed that. I always knew what the next step was. I always knew what that role looked like. Even if I didn't know how to get there, I knew what it was that I wanted to do, and just kept that really clear in my mind. And I think that's followed me every step of the way. That I always knew what I wanted to do. I think I was working for, I worked for, after I had been an assistant, I'd been an editor, I'd been a stylist, and it was really what was next. I was working, I think, having worked with Anna and with Carolina Herrera, Mrs. Herrera, and, somewhat like that sassy, somewhat like, the editor, magazine editor I met when I was young. They were just so in charge of their domain. And I knew that whatever I did, that if I could just sort of channel that energy of being a leader and getting people really bought into my vision and to what I wanted to achieve, that was what I needed. That I needed people to come along with me for the ride, to help me do this, to do this with me. And I saw, Anna and Mrs. Herrera had very clear visions. But it was really incredibly talented and hardworking people around them that helped them do it.
I love that. Did Anna Wintour or Carolina Herrera ever give you a piece of advice that you have always remembered? Or any of the fashion giants that you've worked with?
I think from Anna, I learned that everyone you're going to meet along the way, that you're going to end up working with them or for them someday. So to treat everyone along the way as your ally. I think people probably have this misconception that Vogue was an incredibly, maybe catty or competitive place, but it wasn't. There was a very strong camaraderie, a very strong shared vision, and a really great, and a somewhat professionally nurturing and stimulating environment. So I think I learned that from her. And from Mrs. Herrera, she used to give me a hard time. I would always come into the office with a coffee, like a coffee in a paper cup. And she taught me that coffee is meant to be drunk from a coffee cup.
A mug.
A mug, exactly. So I think she just really helped me understand to just always put forward the best version of yourself.
That's beautiful. Okay, last question to finish this beautiful conversation off. But do you have a favorite quote or a mantra or something that you remember kind of on a daily basis that gets you through tough times, maybe?
I mean, get in, loser. We're going shopping is something like my Roman Empire. Think about it a lot.
Oh, that's perfect.
But I think the real motto that I always have in the back of my head is why be boring? So whether it's if I'm getting dressed, and I can put on the simple black dress, I why be boring? And maybe I'll put on something more fun or pair it with a silly bag or a sparkly shoe, or maybe I'll change the dress altogether. If I'm invited to a party and I'm feeling lazy and, maybe not so inclined to go, I'll say, why be boring? I'll
I
go.
love it.
And so I think, why be boring is, if I'm ever really hard on someone, because I think they're really boring. And so I don't want to be boring myself. Do
I
something
love that.
fun, be silly, be ridiculous. Just don't be boring.
I love it. It reminds me of this Marilyn Monroe quote. I'm paraphrasing, but it says something to the effect of, I'd rather be utterly outrageous than utterly boring. I agree.
Yes, she said it
I
better.
agree.
Yes.
No, I think that's a beautiful sentiment. Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time to come chat with us and sharing your beautiful wisdom. And you're so eloquent and well-spoken. And this was just a wonderful conversation. Tell us where everyone can go to keep up with your work, to support you and your companies and your brand. And
I would say modaoperandi.com to get the most exciting fashion from the runways of New York and London and Paris. And then I'm on Instagram at the LSD.
such an iconic username. You really just nailed it there. Thank you so much for joining us, Lauren.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And to all of our listeners and those watching, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, The Shift. And thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.